today, the First Lady, and she's expressed a desire to sing our song. So, here's how we do it. I hope Gary hasn't forgotten the tune. I hope you haven't forgotten the words. I hope I haven't forgotten the words. And I hope you haven't forgotten the words. One, two, three. Take me out to the ball. Me out to the pool. Buy me some.
From WBRN Radio and on the Boston Red Network, the Monday Morning Quarterback. Boston Red here in the Jerry Pippin broadcast booth, and we honor Jerry Pippin, our late broadcast partner, every Monday morning when we do the Monday Morning Quarterback. Today it is April the 1st, 2019, otherwise known as All Fools Day. We're not certain how many people their birthdays fall on this day, or it should fall on this day. It's the point of, I guess, what we call national debate. But there are some things that happen, very interesting things, particularly in the world of sport. March Madness did produce a bit of madness. The favorite overall, Duke, fell to Michigan State by 1 point, but nonetheless they fell, which in itself is a positive development. The Final Four will move on later in the upper Midwest city of Minneapolis. The four will be there, and we'll have it in sport as to who these teams are. Let me just give you a quick preview here. No reason to not want to move it forward. Texas Tech, the Red Raiders, get it right in a minute. Auburn, and the Tigers of Auburn, and the University of Virginia. Very interesting there. And of course, State. Those scores there: Michigan State 1 point over Duke, and Auburn 77-71 over the University of Kentucky. University of Kentucky would have been favored because they are a basketball powerhouse, but unfortunately for them, they couldn't produce much power. On Saturday, it was a Saturday night or Friday night? Well, anyway, one or the other. The return of one Beto O'Rourke to Austin, Texas. It was at 10:30. We covered that, and it was Saturday night. We are contemplating on a new series called On the Road. Anyway, On the Road this week will feature Beto O'Rourke. He was on the road, and we still have Kristen Gillibrand from last week. We'll get that one in and cap that series off as we look at more and more of these candidates that are on the road. Nonetheless, it was the low 50s, and it was 8:15 in Austin, 45 minutes before Beto O'Rourke was to begin. There was not much of a crowd to speak of, leaving one to whether someone between this upbeat morning rally was in El Paso, Texas, and then of course he went on to Texas Southern University. I knew he went to Houston, but he went to Texas Southern University. That's a historic African American university. Beto is not missing a beat. By the time he ascended to the stage that had been constructed on Congress Avenue for his return to Austin for the first time as a presidential candidate. So in other words, Beto O'Rourke flew from El Paso, that is at the other end of the state. I remember once making a drive from Houston to the pass, very, very long drive across a very, very large state. But nonetheless, Beto O'Rourke was able to move from El Paso, his hometown, to Houston and to Austin in the shadow of the state capitol, where Lyndon Johnson used to roam around there, and Dan Ravis still lives there somewhere. And I don't know if he made it to the rally or not. We'll have to access Mr. Ravis' site to find out what his take was on Beto O'Rourke. And this is from, let me see, what is her name? Jenner, I'm sorry. How'd I'm butchering her name. Anyway, she believes Beto believes in us before anyone else believed in us, and even before we believed in ourselves. That was her. That was Beto O'Rourke. I stand with Beto today because Beto stood with us, is what she went on to say. Oh, I see. Neuser's father is the chair, Gilberto Neuser, has in recent years been a thankless task. He's chair of the state Democratic Party there in Texas, and I got appointed to work here. It has been a thankless task of trying to lead a long-suffering party that's been in the electoral desert. There's no doubt about that, but Beto O'Rourke brought him out of the electoral desert and on to flipping 2 congressional seats, a dozen House seats, and 2 state senator seats, and a raft of judgeships. I believe 15 of them in Houston alone went to African Americans. What did you did in 2017, 2008 was nothing short of a miracle. Beto O'Rourke told his friends, or his faithful, Julia Cordero, the grandson of Madison Caro. I'm not sure who these people are. Anyway, a lot of energy there. Cordero had wanted O'Rourke to run for the Senate again against John Cornyn. A lot of people there, but nonetheless, they were there and they were ready to move on. There's another Texan they running also, Julian. This is Joaquin Castro. Julian is the one running for president. He's from San Antonio. But this was an interesting campaign. We started out with Beto O'Rourke on Saturday in El Paso, Texas, and ended up in Austin that night covering it. It was a long day of coverage. And just looking, this is in the Austin Statesman where we're getting this. Veronica Escobar, she is the person that succeeded O'Rourke in the Congress from El Paso. O'Rourke appeared at UT in September at an event sponsored by a Tahiga club, and he was very surprised that O'Rourke decided to run for president. This is Garcia was talking here. Anyway, and various other people speaking along the campaign route. Beto O'Rourke exploding in West Texas win there. And while we're here, there's a story on the infamous Alice Jones blamed Psychosis for his Sandy Hook hoax claim. Oh boy. He is based in Austin, Texas, provocateur, embroiled in several lawsuits by parents of Sandy Hook. Incidentally, a lot of Cretans believed actually that Jones and various others were telling the truth, but actors were involved in Sandy Hook. Said in a deposition that was released on Friday that his conspiracy thinking was kind of a mental disorder, no doubt about that, but it was financially, as they say, proper. Who claimed on his internet and radio show InfoWars that the mass shooting in Newtown, Connecticut was a hoax. Told lawyers that almost like any form of psychosis back in the past, where I basically thought everything was staged. I would bet he did. He blames his mental state on the trauma of the media and the corporate lies. So much of them, and everything begins, and he claims the admission came towards the end of a 3-hour deposition recorded in downtown Austin. One of several lawsuits brought in Connecticut and also in Virginia against Jones by parents of children that were killed. So long before the lawsuits, I said that in the past I thought everything was a conspiracy. Well, he was in the conspiracy business. The deposition offers a revealing look at Jones' state of mind in a moment of maximum peril for the Austin original. Jones has been strapped since last summer, major social of platforms for InfoWars because of the content of his posts. He was a local cable cult figure who built a vast national audience on radio and online by declaring most of every national travesty since 9/11 as a false flag. With the rise of DJ Trump, the once established icon became a kind of underground auxiliary to Fox News. Throwing flames on the fire, Jones on Monday questioned the circumstances surrounding the death of Jeremy Richmond, one of the Sandy Hook parents had sued him for defamation. His body was found by the road in a Newtown building where Richmond, a neuroscientist, had created a foundation named from his daughter. I mean, how do you get a fair trial with stuff like this? Jones said on InfoWars. I never said this guy's name, and never said his name until now, and obviously we don't know how he got the gunshots or whatever. We have no idea whether he was murdered at this point. Jones said of Richmond's death on Monday. Why would some angry gun guy do this? This is really sad. My prayers to him and his family. He's a liar. The deposition, Jones was ordered by state judge Scott Jenkins in the case of Charlotte Lewis, whose son was one of the 20 first graders, along with 6 educators, shot to death on the 14th of December 2012. On questioning by Bankston, Jones sought to deflect responsibility for years of claims that the shootings were hoaxes to inflame public opinion, undermine gun rights by blaming others whose outrageous and unsupported reports he relied upon. It was his right and responsibility as a pundit under the First Amendment to present alternative points of view. Oh boy, this is rich. But even as he had come to believe over the years that Sandy Hook shootings were real, he continued in depositions to voice conspiracy suspicions that the whole truth about what happened remains hidden. Well, I want to be clear, Jones replied. I believe children died. I believe that there was a mass shooting. I think there was a man in the woods in camo, and just a lot of experts I've talked to, including retired FBI types, other people high up in the Central Intelligence Agency, told me that there was a cover-up at Sandy Hook. A transcript was provided to the Statesman, asked towards the end of the deposition whether people should be accountable should be accountable, where are we here, for people they hurt. Jones replied that sometimes people claim they have been hurt when they haven't been hurt. Jones is a really nasty operator. You have to balance things about why has the mainstream media lied so much, why has our government lied so much, the facts that the public doesn't believe what they are told anymore, and we are going to criminalize questioning Jesse Smollett, or WMD, or babies in incubators, and really is the fact that we allow the government and institutions to become so corrupt that people have lost all compass of what's real. Well, the reason they've lost all compass of what is real is because of characters like Jones. And what Jones does is manipulate the opinions of people that want to believe this. And one of the things we at this mic have come to realization after interviewing thousands of people, that many, many people believe what they want to believe. And it is their mindset. Although in reality they know that it is not factual, but it is what they believe. It's within their mindset. It's just like I was interviewing a fellow once, and the fellow all of a sudden came about talking about an idealistic view called metaphysics, and he'd heard somewhere about metaphysics. Well, this is basically what Jones was dealing into, and people of that nature believe in goblins, ghosts, and the whole array of things that are not real. They're not material. They're just in a fantasy world. And some people feel safe in a fantasy world. They can join people like Jones in their little fantasy. It's sort of like the guy went to a pizza parlor looking for children in the back because he heard that Hillary Clinton and some others were running a ring of child molesters or whatever the hell it was. That these kinds of people are susceptible to anything. But when they hear from quote-unquote corporate media is pushing a line, but that line is sort of like the line in Venezuela where they have put together a narrative. But that narrative is based on a very well-constructed foreign policy called Wilsonian foreign policy, a racist foreign policy. So what they have done is blame the blackouts in Venezuela on trees and bushes and all those sort of things, low maintenance. It doesn't matter if the lines had been maintained for the last 10 years and not maintained. All of a sudden you do not have this string of power failures and plants, all substations all of a sudden catching a fire. And if you look at in the U.S. here in South Florida, they had brownouts or blackouts or whatever you want to call it because of older infrastructure, but they didn't black out 2 or 3 days in a row. That is a very unusual situation. So when we get things painted in that direction, it's sort of like the Gulf of Tonkin, the WND that Saddam had all these nuclear weapons. Well, that was a lie to cover something up. Jones's fantasies are commercial in nature. InfoWars is in the business of selling dubious products, no doubt about that. And in the end, when he is put on trial, he's going to be found liable in many of these lawsuits. And many of his opponents. because it is libel, or it is slander, and it is malice, because he does know it. He can come up with all kinds of a psychosis he wants to, but in a deposition, when you start out with a psychosis theory, in other words, you're crazy, and end up with a rational line that, well, people lie, sometimes the facts aren't clear, etc., etc. No one buys that particular situation, period. Now, in the final here, I didn't get to where this is in a child support thing. His on-air persona, Jones, was a performance artist. There's no doubt about that. He is a performance artist, but in the process, he's injured many, many people. That tells the story of Jones right there. Jones is just a pathological liar. I'll have to get the audio of this. We threw it up on Facebook. I don't think we can get it here. Maybe. No, this is just a rendition of WBRN Radio. Okay. This is a trailer here. This is from the Washington Post, what we learned about Amy Klobuchar 2020. This weekend, they were, where were they? This is on the trail, similar to what we are planning to do. She was in Hornick, Iowa. No idea. I've toured Iowa. I don't know where Hornick is. She wanted to know about the flood that breached the levees there in the town. There's 219 people there. The mayor, she asked Hornick's mayor, Scott Mitchell, about the evacuation. She described how flood-plain towns in her state, Minnesota, had rebuilt. She marveled at how Mitchell's 13-year-old daughter, Veronica, had helped her father without thinking of herself. You got his shoes and they're not yours, Klobuchar said. Anyway, that's sort of going back and forth here. But she doesn't pull the crowds like Kamala Harris or Bernie or Liz Warren. She doesn't aim for the rafters with her stump speech like Beto O'Rourke. And the mayor sound bin. And they pronounce Klobuchar's name. One of the problems you have when you're running for president and have a name that is very difficult to pronounce, you have some problems. That can be two ways. Either people will remember you or not remember you. Hopefully they remember how to spell your name. Who filled the VFW's halls or squares? Half a dozen Democrats do. Klobuchar is not one of those. Her audience are curiously but small. Her Friday night visit to Council Bluffs took place in the same venue and the time of day as Warren's first visit to the city. Attracted 75 people. Well, that's good for her. This, according to Klobuchar, was something she could work with. Council Bluffs, when a reporter asked the senator about a 3% in the Iowa poll, she noted another poll. She was 6%. That's noticing that things will fluctuate. Having met with Jimmy Carter, watching Bill Clinton, I think Iowans are pretty open to candidates and like to listen to smart new ideas. Well, no doubt about that. Carter's upset victory began with a win, technically a second place win. The uncommitted, anyway, and then 1992, Bill Clinton, repeatedly written off, was rescued by a second place in New Hampshire after a weak showing in Iowa. But Iowa is a do-or-die state for Klobuchar, no doubt about that. She has been seen as a prospective presidential candidate for years. Her memo hit shelves in 2015. Well, she's made a lot of trips to Iowa. People know her there. I took the lead, Klobuchar said, along with the Democratic senators running for president. They have not sponsored Medicare for all legislation. She has not endorsed the legalization of marijuana. She has not endorsed free tuition at public colleges. She's not the colleagues who have endorsed all of that, but she just argues that she knows how to pass bills. The goal of universal coverage could be met by starting to expand the Affordable Care Act. Well, there's no doubt about that. Frequently calls herself a progressive before explaining how she came early to an issue or build a coalition. In Council Bluffs, she spent time recalling how Ted Stevens, he was a late senator from Alaska, was talked into backing legislation that tackled swimming pool safety. Well, she is known as the senator of little things. This is not much flash when Klobuchar described the Senate record. The audience is encouraged to listen between notes. Early state voters are going to hear from close to 24 candidates. I can win more than any other senator running. She puts it, electability, the concept that voters say they hate, then prioritize at the public polls. If you haven't noticed by just looking across the border, I can win, she told voters in Sioux City, Iowa. Klobuchar said she did the same thing I do all the time, going not just where it's comfortable, but where it's uncomfortable. I won back 40 Trump counties, okay, she said, and for the third time I won every single congressional district in our state, including the old congressional district that the infamous Michelle Bachmann used to be in. We don't know where the hell she is. Like Sarah Palin, she rode into the sunset. Many, many years ago, there's a movement started here in Iowa and Minnesota called the Grange Movement. She said farmers felt they weren't getting the right price for their goods because they had monopoly railroad companies. That you have monopoly in iron ore, and the movement started where? In Iowa and in Minnesota. She's trying to get back the roots, I suppose, of the Minnesota Farm Labor Party. All kinds of things are going on in Amy's head here. Other candidates describe the same struggles between labor and corporations in dynamic terms. Klobuchar describes a tradition that she wants to pick up and take to the presidency. No voter asked about the stories of how Klobuchar treated her Senate staff. She's glad of that. That hamstrung the start of her campaign. Well, now we have Joe Biden and his operation. Anyway, we went through the men's championship here. It's a sport. 68-67, Michigan State over Duke. And the other game, Auburn 77-71 over the University of Kentucky. The Final Four is now set, and we'll go to the NBA. The Hawks won 136-135. 106 for the Mavericks, 103 for the Thunder. The Lakers 130-102 for the Pelicans. Kings 113-106 for the Spurs. Wizards 95-90 over the Nuggets. The Warriors 137-90 for the Hornets. And the Clippers 113-96 for the Grizzlies. And to professional baseball, gotten a few games over the weekend. Orioles 75 over the Yankees, and in 11 the Tigers 43 over the Blue Jays. The Rays 3-1 over the Astros. The Marlins shut out the Rockies 3-0 in Florida. The Pirates and the Reds, the Pirates 5-0 over the Reds, shut them out. And the Nationals 6-5 over the Mets. That's been a back and forth situation there. And the Brewers pulled it off again, 5-4 over the Cardinals. The Cardinals got 7 hits, no errors. And the Brewers 9 hits and 1 error. Cleveland and the Twins in Minnesota, it was the Twins 9-3. The White Sox and Royals in Kansas City, it was the White Sox 6-3. The Cubbies were in Texas, and it was a hellacious game, but the Rangers finally pulled out 11-10. The Cubs got 17 hits, no errors, and the Rangers 11 hits and no errors. The Athletics and Angels, Athletics 2-1 in Oakland. The Dodgers 8-7 over the D-backs in Los Angeles. The Padres 3-1 over the Giants in San Diego, close to the border. The Mariners and Bo Sox 10-8 in Seattle. The Phillies keep on winning 5-1 over Atlanta. The National Hockey League, Rangers shut out the Flyers 3-0. The Penguins 3-1 over the Hurricanes. The Wild was shut out by the Coyotes 4-0. And the Blue Jackets shut out the Sabres 4-0. The Bruins the Red Wings 6-3 over the Bruins. The Flames and the Sharks, it was the Flames 5-3. And to the women's part of college basketball, the finals, it was UConn 80-3 over the University of Louisville. The Oregon Ducks 88-84 over Mississippi State. And this will do it for us. We got a little bit of mileage here. We have a little bit of Meet the Press. Several of the pundits were over there. We don't get to them very much. Who did we have over there? Peggy Newman, one of our favorite conservative commentators. I guess she's over on NBC. She's not on CBS anymore. But she was there talking about Joe Biden, old school. A little tired here. Did a numbers man broadcast. Hugging and kissing of the 60s and the 70s. A lot of hugging, kissing there. But it's interesting about that complaint, and I've always looked at those complaints as very interesting, and who brought it out. One of the operatives, no doubt. This was 2012. Joe Biden was running for vice president there, and nothing was said of it, and nothing was said in 2016, etc. But all of a sudden, when he's running for president, this lady said that he was standing over. Naturally, he would stand over. He's a tall fellow, and he kissed her on her head, supposedly there. Anyway, he apologized if he offended her, put that to work. But one of the big problems that we have in this particular age, small things, like touching someone or kissing someone, depending obviously on where you kiss them, unless you're DJ Trump, and DJ Trump could take somebody's head off, or as he said, kill somebody on Fifth Avenue. That's DJ Trump. But what these things do is what happened to poor Al Franken, completely derailed his political career when he was at a state fair, and the husband of the woman in question was there, and she was an actor. But this is again back to what people want to believe, an overreaction. One of the things that progressives have to understand, and particularly Democratic Party, is not, as Bill Clinton would say, majoring into minors. Small events like that, you cannot let them take out the substance, and that's not a substantive act. Not to say the woman wasn't offended, but if the woman were really offended, it would have came out in 2012 electoral campaign there. But it's very suspicious when this sort of thing happens here, how Vice President Biden does that. But again, if Peggy Newman was correct, a lot of politicians did this, hug people, kiss people, now supposedly don't touch people. That in itself, back to Jones, causes a psychosis. There's no doubt about that. And this is one of the situations that you're in, and you're playing to the business interests. We put a little bit on Facebook about some of these Democratic candidates playing to the business interests. And that is something progressives have to call out. That's a little mayor from South Bend playing to the business interests, pretending he's a monk. Well, those kinds of things may go over with some people, voters. We don't tell people who vote for here. It's their business. But given the international situation in Venezuela, there could be a war there any day, or on the global scene, some of the downturns in these economies, the headwinds are not particularly good in the U.S., so there are many more serious things to deal with than someone that kissed someone on the top of their head. That would be, 7 years ago, whatever. That situation is a little bit different. Did he make a particular remark? We haven't heard that yet. And the woman said she could come up with names, and nobody has named the names. She was a candidate that, I don't know where she disappeared to, but was not elected. I believe she was running for lieutenant governor in New Mexico. But once again, that was a situation. It was what it was. And Joe Biden basically straightened it out. Basically what he should have just said was, he said he didn't recall the event. It's possible he didn't. I mean, when you have as many events as these politicians have, they don't know. I mean, I remember it on the campaign trail, being hugged by women, etc., etc. I'm not a hugger, so generally speaking, I don't hug people unless I know them or I've seen them more than once, or it's for condolences or something of that nature. But a different kind of situations that would. But I'm not a retail politician either. That has been historically a situation where people shake hands, people embrace people, kiss women on their cheek, etc. You better kiss too many men or they'll be looking at you cross-eyed, or would have in the past. We don't know these days. Should be making jokes like that, given the race out in Chicago. Emma Young and I are going to have to talk about that later today. I noticed I was talking about something there on Facebook. I actually probably just did a share, which is basically most of the time what we do. Anyway, nonetheless, have a good week and a good day from us at WBRN Radio and the Boston Red Network. It's been the Monday Morning Quarterback on the 1st of April 2019, All Fool's birthday. I wonder if this is H's birthday. Possible.
The president had a couple paths that go down after getting some good news on Sunday, as far as he was concerned. Here was the president at his first campaign rally, post-Barr/Mueller report.
There are a lot of people out there that have done some very, very evil things, very bad things, I would say treasonous things against our country. Those people will certainly be looked at.
The Russia witch hunt was a plan by those who lost the election to try and illegally regain power. Sick. These are sick people.
Peggy, maybe I'm stuck in a time warp that thinks that, boy, you have a political opportunity, take it. Yeah. He could have gone down one path. One is that path, the Uma Thurman Kill Bill path, right? Trying to take revenge. Or he could have cornered the Democratic Party this week and said, all right, I'm ready for infrastructure, let's go.
Yeah.
But he went down the revenge path.
Somebody said when it was announced that the Trump White House was going to now push on health care once again after having been unsuccessful the first time, reporter said to a White House official, "Why are you doing health care?" And the White House official said, "Too much good news. Have to change the subject." So there was an element of that. It would have been wonderful to see the president. There's something a little surprising. He was angry when the good news came in. Didn't you get the impression that he was feeling anger when you
He loves the grievance, so yeah.
Well, relief and generosity would have been nice. A little history of how we got there, then put it away. Then, as you say, and as I agree, go forward on infrastructure. He is the builder. America wants to build. Dems are for it. Reps are for it. Go, go, go.
Well, there was consternation inside the West Wing among the president's allies about their whole plan, because let me take you back to like 6 days ago, because not just the Barr summary came out, Chuck, but you also had the guy who was his chief nemesis, Michael Avenatti, got arrested. You had his best pal, Bibi Netanyahu, over at the White House giving him some wine. He was riding high, and then in a matter of 24 hours, that'll change because of this filing deadline on the Affordable Care Act and that lawsuit. And there was real concern, I'm told by my sources, on the part of, for example, Vice President Pence, not a disagreement on the policy, but a disagreement on exactly this, the tactics. Where do you go from here? Because they could see that people like Senator Barrasso are going to get hammered by people asking questions like, where is the plan? Do you have a plan? There was also some questions from the lawyers on the legal viability of this argument. Now, the president, I don't think it's that surprising that he went full revenge mode. He was so mad for 2 years about this. So this was like a moment for him to, grind the grievance axe.
But Rich, when he wonders why is he sitting at 43 to 46%, I would just say, Exhibit A.
Well, this is true, but he was genuinely angry because you have to think of it a little bit from his perspective. So he fires James Comey, as far as I can tell, because Comey refused to say publicly what he was telling Trump privately, which is, sir, you are not under investigation. As soon as he fires him, he's under investigation for 2 solid years, with some people, serious people, suggesting he's committed acts of treason. And I do think there should be an investigation of the investigators, not to wreak vengeance on anyone, because I do think this process went off the rails. We let a garbage oppo gathered from Russian sources by an ex-foreign spy, the so-called dossier, distort our politics for 2 solid years.
Should Lindsey Graham be the guy investigating this, considering the weird relationship he had with the dossier itself?
Lindsey switched around on a lot of stuff. But look, I would say, I know this isn't going to happen, but I feel as though this should be like after the conclusion of the Starr report, where all fair-minded people on both sides say, let's never do this way again.
You want to take this first?
Go for it.
Because I don't know where to start. This stinks, and this is why it stinks. Can you imagine for one moment if Democrats had taken the Starr memo and said, you know what, this exonerates president, nothing really to see here, that Newt Gingrich's head would have exploded. Look, this is part of the problem with Americans think of what's wrong with Washington, is that there's no transparency. If, in fact, he's innocent, and by the way, Barr didn't say exonerated him completely. If, in fact, he's innocent, put it out there and let us all see it. You know, the number that's striking from the Wall Street Journal poll to me is 19. Only 19% of independents think that this clears the president. And you know what? As an operative myself, you know, I got to say, when you're giving your polling data to the Russians as a pollster, it's kind of hard. You say that you're not colluding.
By the way, I do want to put up this number here. This is paying a lot of attention to news coverage on various. We do this all the time in our poll. Put this up. Look where the Mueller report sits compared to other major events over the last couple of years. The Orlando shooting at the Pulse nightclub, the spread of Ebola, Access Hollywood tape. People who watched a lot of news coverage on the Mueller report, it's sitting at a 39, Peggy. Yeah. It is one of these things where understandably why all of us are into it.
Yeah.
And because it's an important investigation. But the middle of the country, I think, that's who this is.
The middle of the country in America in 2019 has been used for decades to watching Washington do its thing and have its partisan investigations, and they do filter it out, I think, to a good degree. I'm sure they're all happy to have an answer now. I have a feeling the president's foes are never going to let this whole Mueller thing, the investigation, go. I think the Mueller report, once it is made public, to the degree it is made public, and then we'll all argue about that, is going to be seen less as a definitive, too explicit Starr report, and more like, oh, we can do Warren report on this for the next few years and pull every thread we see.
What are we going to be debating more in the next 6 months, though, Hallie? Obamacare? Or are we going to be debating the full release of the Mueller report? I don't think we're going to be debating what's in the Mueller report for a while. I think we're going to be debating the full release, but what matters more?
It's definitely, I think, the healthcare law. I think when you look at the numbers and when you look at what people are interested in, and when you look at what people are talking about on the 2020 campaign trail, specifically Democrats, they are not talking about Russia and the Mueller report. Now, that said, the president, and there are those around him who do see this as essentially a political cudgel to be able to use against Democrats. So, for example, this deadline issue. Bill Barr came out in that letter and said mid-April. I'm told by folks inside the White House, their stance is going to be, we're okay with that, and we're going to blast the Democrats for demanding it by Tuesday.
This counterintuitively could be a reason why this outcome hurts the president, because Russia was always a blind alley for the Democrats. The case against Trump is not that he's a Russian spy or he's a proto-fascist or any of that. It's what Nancy Pelosi's been trying to do. He's a conventional Republican masquerading as a populist with all the same Republican policies. That is the more powerful case.
That's a fascinating way to put it. I'm going to pause it there, because that's a dangerous place for Trump to be, because he ran as something not as that. Up next, can a self-described extreme moderate win the Democratic nomination? John Hickenlooper is trying. My interview with the former Colorado governor when we come back. And comfort was Biden, followed by Sanders, Warren, Harris, and O'Rourke. Biden had the most saying they were enthusiastic or comfortable at 70%. Now, with independents, the candidate order essentially held with lower levels of support, of course. Overall, however, Biden and Sanders seem to have an advantage with independents, both with close to 50% saying they'd be comfortable or enthusiastic supporting him or them. Republicans also followed the same pattern with much lower numbers. Biden stands out from the crowd here with 21% saying they'd be comfortable supporting him. That could suggest he has some crossover appeal if he runs and wins the nomination. Look, name recognition is obviously crucial when running for president, and it could explain the stronger showings for Biden and Sanders right now. And we should note that Sanders also starts with the highest negatives among Democrats as well. Harrison O'Rourke received the highest numbers for don't know the name or not sure in our poll. But that also means both Harris and O'Rourke have a better shot at defining themselves on their own terms throughout the campaign, unless somebody does it for them. And that may be the case for much of the Democratic field. It's not a bad place to be in the spring of 19. When we come back, speaking of 2020, the political re-education of Joe Biden. Back now with Endgame and a story that actually continues to develop this morning, the accusation against former Vice President Biden. He has put out a new statement. Let me read the whole thing in part and let's dive into this discussion. The original context had to do with a Democratic candidate for the lieutenant governor in 2014 talking about essentially Vice President Biden invading her personal space in an extraordinarily uncomfortable way. Here's what Vice President Biden, his second statement on this. In my many years on the campaign trail and in public life, I have offered countless handshakes, hugs, expressions of affection, support, and comfort. And not once, never, did I believe I acted inappropriately. If it is suggested I did so, I will listen respectfully. But it was never my intention. I may not recall these moments the same way, and I may be surprised at what I hear. But we have arrived at an important time when women feel they can and should relate to their experiences, and men should pay attention, and I will. Cornell Belcher should note, Lucy Flores, who's did an interview this morning on CNN, called this statement better than the first one.
It's a very good statement, but it's also not what you want to start off your campaign having a conversation about. Right? I think they want to start their campaign having a conversation about leadership and vision for the future. This is not, but this is also what happens when you're the front runner, and you die by a million paper cuts. And I think this is going to be, given his time in history, they want to focus on his competence in beating Trump. They don't want to be talking about this morning.
You know, let me put up the headlines that you referred to here. Politico has a great one, which is that he's getting a quick 2020, blindsided by a dose of 2020 reality. Obviously, this allegation, there was also Anita Hill's come up this week, his back and forth on Roe v. Wade. Joe Biden's greatest strength is the fact that he's been in the political mainstream for 40 years. Right. His greatest weakness is that he's been in the political mainstream for 40 years.
Well, on this allegation, there's a reason God gave us the handshake. You know, it's always respectful, it's always appropriate. And
it's gender neutral.
Yeah, on the crux of his statement, I don't think this was like sexual or malicious, but it was way over familiar. And it would immediately, in any workplace, get you reported to HR to say stop doing that. And the problem he's going to have is, as you say, all this record and how he deals with it. And I just think if he apologizes too much, he's going to risk seeming insincere and weak. And in theory, I think he's a really formidable general election candidate, but no one in either party in our national politics will say, you know what, I want to own the old guy establishment lane in one of our major political parties.
We're talking, and I think, you know, rightfully so, about a lot of the political piece of this, but there is such a big cultural element to this, too. I mean, we are now post-Me Too, October 2017, right? That's not that long ago. And more broadly speaking, on a big picture level, candidates have to grapple with what it means to have had white male privilege for many years. And you're seeing that in this very public way. Voters are demanding it. The women candidates running are in some ways demanding some accountability for that, too. This goes beyond the realm of politics. It's much bigger than that.
Oh, I think it has to do with the fact, in part, that Joe Biden is a longtime American political figure who came from the fleshy world of 60s and 70s politics. And when everybody started to hug and kiss, we're different from the 40s and 50s. We're hugging, we're kissing, all that stuff is going on. That's part of his story right now. Another thing is, I think for the first time in his life, Joe Biden is seeing himself the target of his own party's oppo. He's got operatives for other candidates going after him in a way that will have to be startling.
Can he survive this?
Yes.
How? How does he survive it?
Yes, because he pivots to the issues, and well, I think it was a very good statement because he acknowledges it, and you're absolutely right. The culture has fundamentally changes, which is a problem for a lot of our older candidates who, to your point, came up in a culture that was very different. But I think he can survive it, and this is why he survives it: comfort. The number that popped out in the NBC poll is comfort, and Democrats are very, very comfortable with Joe Biden. However, I don't think that sets people on fire.
Yeah. The good news is you know what you're going to get. The bad news is you know what you're going to get.
That's a really good point.
All right, guys. That's all we have for today. What a show. Thank you for watching. We'll be back next week because if it's